Who are the elite prospects in the 2025 NFL draft, and who has the most to gain and potentially become one of those elite prospects at the top of the draft from the NFL Scouting Combine? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love our everydayers. Let us know you stopped by. If you're on YouTube, hit that thumbs up. I know you're already subscribed. And if you're not subscribed and if you're new to the program, welcome. Please subscribe. Helps us out tremendously and helps you catch all the shows as we break down the entire NFL through draft season, free agency, all the trades, and back into the 2025 season. We're here with you every day, even throughout the off season, and helps other folks find our program. So subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to this podcast. And today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel. And right now, new customers at FanDuel can get $150 in bonus bets. And all you got to do is win your first $5 bet. Just go to FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we're gonna focus on the top of the draft elites. Who are the clean first-round grades? And there's a number of opinions on this subject. I have mine. Matt, you have yours. Every draft analyst kind of has theirs. I want to start with the idea because I think this will help us hash out who are the draft's elite players and elite prospects here. Who has the most to gain from the combine this year as the combine inches closer and closer? And I want to go to a question from, it is Justin on Twitter. He says, which prospects have the most to gain from the combine? Do the fans make more of a deal out of the scouting combine than the general managers in the NFL?
Maybe. Certainly out of the 40s and whatnot. You know, I mean, just pure numbers. Did he run a 4.39 or a 4.2, 4.42? You know, I mean, that type of stuff. Now, I think I do this every year. We must remind people why the combine was created in the first place. First of all, Indianapolis is the perfect town for it. I can't wait to go. And something like 18 different franchises can drive there. I mean, I drive there. It's like a 5-hour drive from Pittsburgh, but it's centrally located. It's a convention city. It's flat. You don't have to go outside. It's great. So it's perfect for it. I hope they never move it. But the biggest reason the combine was created was medical. Instead of bringing all these guys to 32 different cities, you bring them all to one and you bring all the doctors to Indy and you dig in the medical. That still is the number one important thing. And we never get all that information, but never, ever, ever forget that. Now, I also think the interviews are certainly important. But after sitting in a couple interviews that year I was with the Browns, I came away thinking these aren't as important as I thought they were. Because they're 15 minutes. The young guy comes in, shakes 10 dudes' hands. Hey, how you doing? Blah, 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 blah. That eats up 2 minutes of your 15. And then you start grilling them or talking to them or whatever, but you don't really get to know them. I mean, to me, that's like the visits, you know, eat lunch with them, spend the whole day with them, do the research behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff. And then the on-the-field stuff is great. But I also think it can be a little overblown. I mean, I'm real big on as soon as the numbers come out, okay, here's the O-line one group. I look at the top 10%. I look at the bottom 10% and vertical, everything. Like, who are the outliers? Because most of them are kind of in the middle. But I also think that it answers some questions, or brings up questions. Don't count Xavier Worthy twice. If you watched his tape at Texas, he's fast.
Right. Does it really matter if he's 4.31 or 4.22?
Right. Does he go for a second round grade from a first round grade just because he's fast and on the turf out of a 3-point stance, out of a track stance? Don't count it twice. But I was shocked. I'm just thinking of a recent example. Michael Penix does not play like a fast quarterback, but in his pro day, he ran like a 4.5 flat or something crazy. And I'm like, is he faster than I think? And I'm like, he doesn't really play it. I don't care. You know, I mean, it's a nice little bonus, but I'm not going to give him extra credit for that, you know?
I think Shedeur Sanders is going to do that in this year's combine.
Really?
I think there's more athleticism than he shows on the field. I think his dad brought him up to be a pocket passer. I think deep down he's a pocket passer. That's what he is. He's not going to put up ridiculous times. But I think when you compare him to other quarterbacks, he's going to be, when you look at the pocket passers in his class, and be like, oh, I mean, he is Deion Sanders' kid. He's going to run. Yeah. He's going to be athletic, more athletic than he shows you in games. And, you know, it might help him. And it might. And he's potentially a guy that could gain a lot from the combine if we're starting to count those players. Just because
he might not be as athletic as dad, who was
right. Exactly. He's not going to run like, you know, people talk about, you know, some of the crazy 40 times that, you know, hand times that guys put up back in the day before we, you know, had all the official laser times. And Deion Sanders, he was 4.17 on somebody's watch. You know,
right.
I mean, the stories about Bo Jackson and stuff. You know, look, they're fast. Again, you don't need you don't need any times to know that they're fast. And that's what's kind of funny about this is there are some players that are at fast guy positions, wide receiver, cornerback, that you need to check that box. And I think that's what the combine is about. It's about checking the box. But as it pertains to 40 times in athletic testing, I think offense, you can tell a lot more about, we talk about this every year. You can tell a lot more about offensive linemen 40 times and shuttle runs than you can the fast guy positions. The fast guy positions, you need to find out if they're going to be tough and win physically in the NFL, because you can't run around guys anymore. So the fast guys, you need to learn how physical they are to get your draft report, your scouting report correct on a guy. And for offensive linemen, you need to find out how athletic they are to get your scouting report right, because they're already big and they're already tough if you have that box checked off. So it's really about checking off all the boxes. And, you know, the 15-minute interviews are kind of a sham, but, you know, there's probably like one thing you could really find out about a player in that amount of time. You're like, I need to find this one thing out about this guy that I need to figure out from the tape. Or you learn about the other prospects because you ask him about his teammate. And this guy's like, he's like, oh, this guy was out all night.
They're not worthless.
Time. Or this guy's a leader. I would go to war for this guy. And it kind of helps your other evaluation because you learn about it. And so you can do a lot of that. And I think one of the things that I hate about this process too, with the interviews, and they're kind of bouncing around, jumping all over the place. And I have a list of some guys that could really help themselves with the combine. We'll get more specific here in a second. The like, and I don't know if it was like this in your, like every team's a little bit different, but some teams you just have some position coach come in, like, a defensive lineman comes in and the defensive line coach goes, just craps on him, just completely MFs him. What is that? You know, and like, trying to see if you can rile him up or see what, and it's just like, come on, that's some tired, corny stuff, you know? And so I think a lot of teams are getting more away from that than they used to, but I think there's still some teams that do that, and they just completely, essentially, it's almost like a drill sergeant situation. You just completely berate a guy for 15 minutes and see how he handles it. I mean, it's corny, but a lot of teams still do that. A lot of teams used to do that.
And there's the dumb stuff too, and kind of singling out the Giants. Do you like dogs or cats? Do you like apples or oranges? Do you like sunsets or sunrises? You know, like, do we really need this stuff? You know, come on.
And who was the player? I think it was a wide receiver a few years ago, and they asked him in the combine interview, like,
about his mom and stuff, like
dead mother or something like that, or his mother.
I think it was like her. I think she had like a prostitute background or something.
Oh, it might have been Des Bryant. Actually,
that sounds familiar. I mean,
just like, you shouldn't have a job in the league if that's the
right. Come on, what are we doing here?
Like, give me a freaking break, you know. So, but we are getting a little bit away from that sort of mentality in the NFL, which is a very good thing, I think, in my opinion. But you can't.
I probably tell a story every year, but like, I do remember sitting in on an interview and going through 15 minutes and being like, I didn't get a whole lot out of this, but maybe, I mean, it's better than not doing it. But as the young man who ended up being a top 10 pick, we had the third pick of the draft, walked out the door, a seasoned scout just goes, Super Bowl or Pro Bowl? And he goes, Pro Bowl. And we're like,
and guys are so coached up now too, for all that, you know, guys work so hard at all the drills and all the combine stuff. They know which drills they're going to do, what they're going to work out on, what they're good at. They don't want to show you the stuff they're not good at. And they already know what the stand, like they already know they're going to get, are you a dog or a cat person? And
right.
Even if you are a cat person, just answer dog person. That's what they want to hear. You want to be loyal and all those things.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes the answers don't even matter. It's how you answer it and, your thought process. Are you a thoughtful person? Can you articulate stuff? Because I think you have to be smart to be an elite player in the NFL, right? There's you notice all these star players are like amazing speaking on camera. I don't think that's a coincidence, right? Like,
especially nowadays, they've probably done it since they're 10 years old. Right? TikTok and all these different things. They've been stars since they were like my son's buddy was a really, really good 7th, 8th grader, and now all of a sudden he's short, and he's going to end up maybe at a MAC school if he's lucky. But he's got a bazillion Instagram followers from when he was in 8th grade. And he's not special. He's not LeBron. He's just a good kid,
Next, I've got specific names. Who can help themselves the most at the NFL Scouting Combine coming up very soon here? And who even are the elite prospects in the NFL draft? One of those elite prospects, we don't even know what position he's going to play in the NFL. We'll get to it next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by a message from Intuit TurboTax. And taxes used to be waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on whatever it is you need to do throughout your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So who are the players that could help themselves out most at the combine? You talked about the medical part of it, and I'm going to go to my favorite offensive lineman in the draft, Josh Simmons. And I believe you had Josh Simmons in your mock
very high,
number 4 overall to the New England Patriots. And I think, to be honest with you, I think the Patriots is kind of the lens you could look through all of this, because Josh Simmons, he's the best left tackle in this draft, and on tape, in my opinion.
Yeah. When clean, just watching tape, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
He had a torn patellar tendon. And so, okay, you put a big asterisk next to his name. Shoot, we either like the medical and could draft him top 5, or we don't like the medical, and maybe we wouldn't draft him at 25. So that is a massive delta of what Josh Simmons could be, and how important the medical, and then the medical rechecks again before the draft. A lot of guys go back and do that again because teams want to see what the update is on these players. And we'll probably see someone like Josh Simmons maybe, do a lot of 30 visits as well, so teams can get as much information as possible, because a lot of teams need someone who could be a left tackle, and there might not be that many clean left tackles in this NFL draft, and he's the best of them. But he's got this huge asterisk next to his name and this huge red flag, because you don't want to draft a guy who's not going to be available for your football team. And maybe for a team like the Patriots that's a little bit more worried about year 2, year 3 for a guy, might be more willing to draft someone like Josh Simmons, whereas someone who's trying to win now and needs to plug a guy in, they can't wait around for a couple of years to make sure this guy's 100%. So that's going to be huge for Josh Simmons and the medical on him. And there's a lot of guys with medical, but Josh Simmons is the one that really screams out to me, because the medical is going to say whether he's a top 10 pick or not, or whether or not he's the number 1 offensive lineman in this draft.
Yep. And back to my point about, the number 1 goal next week is the medical stuff. Well, there's 32 different opinions on these guys too. They all share information, but they decipher it however they want. They're doctors. This isn't math. There might be 2 teams that say you can't draft that guy. He's a medical reject. I'm just pulling this out of my butt. And then there's 15 or 10 that are say he's good to go. Take him as high as you want. Don't have any concerns. And the other ones are like, let's bring him back, or bring him to the facility as close to the draft as we possibly can, and we'll get more information.
And there's a human element too. So there might be a team where there's a GM who has gotten burned by drafting guys who are hurt. And he's like, I don't do that. I don't touch those guys. And then there could be another GM,
or they're on the hot seat and they can't wait till next year.
Right.
They don't care if he gets 4 or 5. A lot of I've been in those rooms. A lot of the conversations are, he's fine but I don't think you're going to want to re-sign him because he's going to be falling apart by.
Yeah.
And if you're like, I don't care about 4 years from now, I just need a left tackle today. Okay,
I always think about who's I always blank on his name. The running back out of Boise State about 10 years ago. He played
Ajayi.
Jay. Awesome
Yeah.
tape. I was like, how is this guy not like a second round pick? And he slides in the NFL draft. And then after the draft, and that's what's funny is like the day after the draft, all of a sudden you get all this information. Oh, this guy had this character thing. This guy had this medical thing. And you're like, okay, well, why couldn't I learn that last week? It really helped me prepare for the NFL draft. But Jay, the film was awesome. He goes to the NFL. He's a good player. But he had bone on bone in his knee. And they're like, yeah, well, he's going to play for 4 years. So you might get a good player for 4 years. And guess what? He had a super short career and he was pretty good for a while. And then that injury started to really derail it. And then that was it for Jay. And so
everyone in the league knew it.
Yeah.
Like when he became a free agent, it's like, oh, he's good, but I'm not giving him money,
Right. And then I think the next offensive lineman who could have claim to the best offensive lineman in the draft, Will Campbell. And for him, tape is good. Teams are going to like him a lot. How long are his arms? If he walks up and he's got 34-inch arms, he makes himself a lot of money. But I think those are kind of measurements that I think some people have seen, unless his arms have grown. The word is it's not going to be long arms, and he's going to be a guard. And so that's going to change how high teams draft them. And teams might say still that Will Campbell's the best offensive lineman in the draft, and if he's there, we're going to draft him. But it might be the difference in going number 4 overall and going number 20, 15, whatever it is, And so
we'll try him at tackle and move him to guard or center, as opposed to he's a tackle. I mean, that's why I put Simmons so high, because he's a tackle.
Because he's the true and left tackle too, because you got Mimbo on the right side, and then he might still be a guard. And every single one of these offensive line prospects, it feels like in this draft, is like maybe a better guard than a tackle. And Kelvin Banks, he needs to have that arm length when he weighs in. It's really important. He needs to show the athleticism of a left tackle when he works out. So I think it is pretty important. Offensive linemen, it's more important at the combine than I think people realize. And of all of the position groups, if I can only see combine testing from one position group, it'd probably be offensive linemen.
No doubt. And I meant to say this even at the beginning when we were previewing the combine. There's the most predictive number right now is, I forget what the actual number is, but short shuttle for interior linemen. If you do well, almost every one of them hits. Like every one of them. I
think it's 4.40 or 4.50 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like nearly 100% hit rate.
Which makes sense. I mean, they're like, Aaron Donald gives you a double move and I got to recover and I got to change directions. Or I'm getting the second level. I'm hitting somebody that's 85 pounds lighter than me and much more athletic. How do I hit him in space and not fall on my face? I'm like, that adds. And I'm also big on 3-cone for edge rushers and tight ends.
Yep. Yeah. And again, arm length is huge for all these pass rushers. And I guess we can go to that next because there's so many tweener pass rushers in this class. You've got Mike Green. We already know what Mike Green's measurables was because he was at the Senior Bowl. And he's 6'3", which is good. And he was over 250 pounds, which is good. But he had 32.5-inch arms, which is not good. And, 34-inch arms, people might say this is the next DeMarcus Ware. Right. Because but it makes that much of a difference. And so now it's like, okay, we like a tape. We love him. But man, we wish he was a little bit longer. And maybe he's more of a fit for just the odd fronts and not the teams that want to employ a full-time, hand in the dirt defensive end. And he might not fit for those teams. James Pierce, the same thing. Can he get close to 250 pounds? He's listed at 6'5", 240. That's like NBA build. He looks like a wide receiver sometimes. He's so narrow. Can he prove that he's going to be strong enough and big enough in the NFL? Can he get close to 250 pounds when he weighs in? That'll be huge. Jalen Walker is another one because I think he's a first-round edge. I think he's probably a day 2 off-ball linebacker. And so if he shows up at 6'3" with 34-inch arms, close to 250 pounds, he makes himself a lot of money and maybe becomes a top 10 pick. If not, maybe he's a back half of the first-round player. So those speed edge rushers, if they can prove they have the size and they just include more teams that would be willing to draft you super high, and they all have really good tape, and they all are players that could go high, and you see them high in mock drafts. But if Jalen Walker shows up and he's 6'2", 239 and has 32.5-inch arms, no chance.
It's gonna crush him, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I think people realize it's a very deep running back draft. I heard Mel Kiper say a couple weeks ago he has 35 running backs with a draftable grade. Of course, 35 running backs are not going to get drafted. But I was listening to Todd McShay's podcast just yesterday, and he has 35 day 1 or 2 grades on defensive linemen from nose tackle to edge. I mean, so it's 35 of them. And he said it's basically like 17 edge guys, 17 interiors. Well, this week is going to go a long way to if you're number 12 or if you're 17 or if you're 12 or you're 8. I mean, you're just breaking ties. I mean, that's a real cluster.
Yeah, and if you have the same grade on 2 interior defensive linemen, 2 defensive tackles, one of them shows up at 290 and the other's 310. You're like, well, we're going to go with the size here because we need to go run to go get the quarterback, even though you have the same grade on these guys. So, it's really important.
And DeForest Buckner is a lot different than Geno Atkins. You know, like the Steelers don't want the Geno Atkins types. You know, so I'm going to rule those ones out for us. You know.
And again, outliers for corners and wide receivers. You want to run well, but you can't run 4.6. You know, you just
don't be bad,
and you'll be okay. You know, it runs and that brings me to my last 2 guys I think that can really help themselves, and I think it's very similar to the Josh Simmons thing. And again, looking at the New England Patriots, if Tetairoa McMillan, who's got superstar potential at wide receiver, 6'5", 210, if he runs 4.45, he's the 4th pick in the draft. Done. Mark it down in ink.
Yeah.
Right. If he runs 4.55, could go a lot of places. Some teams can really like him still, but if he it's just checking that last box because everything's there, and it's like, how fast is he really? Sometimes it's hard to tell, and it's the exact same story for Will Johnson. And again, you're going to take a guy who's got a 3rd round tape grade and he runs 4.3, and you're going to put him in the 1st round because that's how mistakes are made. But for Will Johnson and Tetairoa McMillan, superstar potential for both of these guys. They're in the top half of the 1st round in most mock drafts, but they're in very different spots depending on who's doing the projecting. If Will Johnson and Tet McMillan can run mid 4.4s, then they become part of the draft's elite, and they're right there in that next group after Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, and they don't get out of the top 10. If they run 4.5s, then maybe it starts to look a little bit different. If they run 4.58 and start getting closer to 4.6, then you have a real problem there. I don't think they're going to run that slow, but the difference between 4.45 and 4.55 for those 2 players particularly is millions and millions of dollars.
100%. Then they might tease us and come in at a nice weight and build, and then lose some weight and only work on their 40s and do it on their track. And,
what really is, now that you say that, neither one of those guys are going to run, huh?
Probably, I don't know that I would if I were them. You know, it's almost like you can only do bad things to yourself if you do
that. Next, let's talk Travis Hunter. Who is Travis Hunter? Is he a wide receiver? Is he a cornerback? And more about the top of the NFL draft. This episode of Peacock Williamson brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off, you can still bet on that 4th quarter comeback. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. And it's so fun using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. It keeps every game exciting, even if your favorite team is not playing. Whether you're backing your own team or you want that late game rally, or you're picking a player to hit a clutch 3, it never feels like you miss a chance to be involved in the action. And not only is NBA getting very serious now, post All-Star game, post trade deadline, you got the college tournament coming up, you got baseball coming up, and you can still bet on the NFL, including the NFL draft. And the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets, and all you got to do is win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today or download the app. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Travis Hunter. We had multiple questions on Travis Hunter. Josh says, why would Travis Hunter play corner when the money to play wide receiver has gotten so much better? And it's a valid question. A question from JDS here on, and by the way, both Josh and JDS, free and tweeters into the show, always with great questions. Appreciate you guys. He says, what position is easier to learn and do well in year 1? Wide receiver or cornerback? Seems like there's a shortage of good corners, especially young ones. And so what do you think, Travis Hunter? If you're there's 2 things. If you're a team, what do you want Travis Hunter to be for you? And if you are Travis Hunter, what do you want to be?
Well, I think he does it because he's awesome at it. To answer the first question, and he's got the stamina, and he's been able to do it, and there's no reason to stop doing what's working. It's not quite what they asked, but I really have doubts that he's going to be a full-time both. I don't think that's going to be possible, and not because he's not good enough, but you got to go to a position room and prepare. Like, it's a full-time job. I mean, you can't even moonlight on your full-time job well, because you're either practicing with the offense or the defense. You either go to the wide receiver room or the corner room. And looking at like Dion, I think it's probably easier to be a corner and moonlight as a minor in wide receiver and only run a couple routes, particularly deep stuff. But I just wonder, like, if I can only play man, or if I'm not sure, if I'm not great with, is there going to be a tell? When he's on the field on either side of the ball, oh, they're playing man coverage, or he's only going to follow a receiver, or he's only going to run go routes or gimmick stuff, because there's just not as much practice time as you think, But I do think there's a really good question of why not just do the thing that pays the most and catch 80 balls and 12 touchdowns a year.
And I would totally get that if he said, I want to be a wide receiver. It's harder to learn wide receiver. So it seemed like it would be easier to be a full-time wide receiver and moonlight at corner, but nobody ever does that.
But no one ever does it, right?
The other way around. And Travis Hunter specifically isn't a great wide receiver in college because the nuances of the position. It's just because he has amazing ball skills and he's a crazy athlete. Like, he's just going out there and winning because he's good. He's a much better corner, much further along in development at corner. I think, 9 out of 10 teams have him. They're drafting him to play corner and also help out at wide receiver. But you'd be crazy not to use his talent on both sides of the ball. So,
I'm not implying even 10 years from now he won't do both, but I can't believe he'll be full-time at both.
I think it's just too hard, the physical rigor of it. And,
especially after your first injury, like now I got an ankle and
there's
12 games in.
There's already a rookie wall. Like, with preseason and this whole draft process, halfway through the season, you would be just gassed because you've already played like a full college season and you're expected to still play another half of NFL football on both sides of the ball. Guys who play one side of the ball hit the rookie wall as it is. So, and probably it'd be smart to slow play that. But yeah, you got to have a package on offense. Start there, see where else it goes. And look, you could change. You could say, man, he's better and a more difference maker for our team at wide receiver. And you can go from being a package player to a full-time wide receiver and a package player on defense too. Like,
he's turning into Revis. That itself is enough. And he runs 10 routes or return punts or whatever. Or, I mean, I always bring it back to the Steelers, but like Antonio Brown was a great punt returner, but they only did it like in the playoffs or when they were down. They needed something huge. Like, maybe it's just when we really need it, we can pull out this ace up our sleeve for the X side of the ball,
And here's the thing is, if you're Travis Hunter and you go to the bargaining table, you're not going to get paid as a corner because you're not just a corner. You're a corner and a wide receiver. And it's why you're getting drafted high. So you're probably going to be the highest paid corner in the league if you're a legit corner. Plus you do wide receiver stuff. So you have more value than anybody else, right? That plays that position.
Yep.
Wide receiver has really taken over corner as far as value to teams. And I don't really understand. I mean, I get some of the reason why, but the scarcity, is way on the side of cornerback. It is so much harder to find a stud shutdown cornerback than it is to find really good wide receivers. There is tons of wide receivers. There's still, like, this is a down year for wide receivers. There's still going to be a couple wide receivers off the board before there's a couple corners off the board in this draft, right? And it's just the position is so stocked. And you look at the free agency, you look at trade players that are available in trade. You can trade for a top receiver. You can't trade for a top corner. So I think the league might have it wrong. I think smart money might be to go find stud corners and pay them instead of the second tier wide receivers. You have to pay like a tier 1 wide receiver.
So I had this conversation on another show and I was so far off, but I'm going to do it to you. How many catches do you think Dion had in his NFL career?
Oh man, I don't think it's that many because a lot of the ball in his hand stuff was, punt returns and kick returns. I would guess like, I mean, less than 100 catches total. I would say.
You're better than me then. I thought it was like
Really?
150.
Okay.
It's 60. He has 60
Okay,
total catches, and like all of them were in 1996. I mean, he had 36 catches in 1996 with the Cowboys for whatever reason.
Oh, wow.
And he never had more than 7 in any other year.
Yeah.
A lot of 7s and 6s and 3s and 4s, like for a whole season. I mean, Hunter could probably do more than that if he's a full-time corner, but I mean, we're uncharted waters here.
The other thing is, year one, his head would probably spin a lot more at wide receiver than it would at corner.
Absolutely.
So I think early in his career, he'll be more impactful at corner. And then you can slowly build the wide receiver stuff in for him because he's not, he hasn't played as much wide receiver. And clearly he's not as far along in the details of being a wide receiver. And it takes wide receivers usually a little bit longer anyway than corners. So
you think Peyton Manning or Tom Brady would be cool with, hey, whenever Hunter can get here, let's just run a couple routes whenever you have a little bit extra time. No, I need you here every snap. I'm not just going to, I'll stay after practice with you and all that. But whenever you don't feel like playing corner, you're going to come run a post route with me and you expect me to be on time. No, I mean, I need you here all the time.
It's very detail oriented at wide receiver. Like you have to run this
option routes.
This isn't a suggestion. You run this route 12 yards. Exactly. Not 11, not 13, 12 yards. And your release has to take you 1 yard outside the hash before you cut at 12 yards. Right? And you have to know that for every play, every position. So it's got to start with a small package and grow from there, a wide receiver.
And I'm going to release it before you come out of your break. And if you screw it up, it looks like I threw a terrible interception. I'm never going to throw the ball again.
Yeah, exactly. The time off, and all of a sudden you make the quarterback look bad.
Yeah. I mean, you're reading cover 2 on the fly and either sit down or you run through it or.
The only way he becomes a wide receiver first is if he makes a big stink about it and he just has to play wide receiver.
And maybe the team has good corners and bad receivers.
And they just like the talent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the questions. Some good ones. We didn't get to very many, but apologies to the ones we did not get to. We actually
carry some stuff over tomorrow too.
Yeah. We have some holdover questions and some topics we've got to hit on tomorrow's episode as well. We're talking drafts, we're talking combine, we're talking free agency, tons of trades potentially this offseason. It's going to be a fun one. And you can hang out with us every day as we break it all down right here on Peacock and Williamson.